The gunshot that shattered Olivia Jensen's mirror was the final verdict on her worth in this dusty Colorado town, and she stood trembling among the glass shards, knowing her father's debts would cost her everything she had left. It was August 1881 in Pueblo, Colorado, a railroad town that had grown fat on cattle drives and mining prospects, but lean on mercy for those who fell behind. Olivia pressed her back against the peeling wallpaper of the boarding house room she could no longer afford, watching three men push through her door without invitation. The largest one, a creditor named Silas McGraw, held a leather-bound ledger like it was holy scripture. "Your father owed $2,000 when he died," McGraw said, his voice flat as hammered iron. "The boarding house, your possessions, even the clothes you are wearing, Miss Jensen. All of it goes to auction tomorrow to settle the debt." Olivia was 22 years old, and in that moment she felt ancient. Her father had been a dreamer, always one card game away from striking it rich, one investment away from respectability. Instead, he had drunk himself to death 3 weeks ago, leaving her with nothing but his failures and a reputation so tarnished that even the laundresses refused her company. "I have nowhere to go," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. McGraw shrugged. "That is not my concern. Be out by sunrise, or I will have the sheriff remove you." They left her standing in the wreckage of her life. The mirror her mother had brought from St. Louis lay in pieces. The bullet hole in the wall behind it was McGraw's way of making a point. He had done the same to the Murphy family last month, and to the Chinese laundry owner before that. Power in Pueblo meant money, and mercy was a luxury nobody could afford. Olivia had 2 dresses, both patched. She had a mother-of-pearl hairbrush, 3 letters from a cousin in California who had stopped writing years ago, and a cameo brooch that had been her grandmother's. She wrapped these items in a flour sack and walked out into the brutal afternoon sun, knowing she would not be coming back. The streets of Pueblo smelled like horse manure and coal smoke. The Arkansas River ran brown and sluggish through the center of town, dividing the respectable side from the side where Olivia now belonged. She had no trade, no family, no prospects. Women in her position had limited options, and most of those options ended with them working in the cribs along First Street, where the railroad men spent their wages on Friday nights. She walked past the Grand Hotel where she had once taken tea with her father, back when his credit was still good. Past the dry goods store where Mrs. Henderson saw her coming, and deliberately turned the sign to closed, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. Past the church where Reverend Thompson had preached her father's funeral to an empty room, unwilling to waste words on a man who died owing money to half the congregation, worthless. That was what she heard whispered as she passed. The Jensen girl, worthless as her father. Probably end up the same way. By the time the sun started its descent toward the mountains, Olivia had walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to prairie grass and the vast emptiness of the west. She sat on a fence rail and stared at the horizon, trying to imagine what came next. She could walk to Denver, maybe, or south toward Trinidad, but walking without money or supplies was a death sentence, and she knew it. "You planning to sit there all night, or are you waiting for something specific?" The voice startled her so badly she nearly fell off the fence. She turned to find a man leading a paint horse, both of them dusty from the road. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, worn denim, a battered hat, a bandana tied loose around his neck. A Colt revolver sat on his hip, but his hand was nowhere near it. "I am not waiting for anything," Olivia said, trying to sound dignified despite everything. "I am just resting. The cowboy looked at the flour sack at her feet, then at her face. His expression was unreadable. "You are a terrible liar, but that is probably a good thing. I do not recall asking your opinion." "No, you did not." He tied his horse to the fence and sat on the rail a respectful distance away. "Name is Preston Reed. I have been working a ranch up north, and I am passing through on my way to New Mexico. And you are the woman I saw McGraw threatening in the boarding house window yesterday." Olivia felt her face flush hot. "So you know. The whole town knows. I am the worthless daughter of a worthless man, and I have nothing to my name but debts and shame." Preston was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun paint the clouds orange and pink. "I knew your father," he finally said. "Not well, but I played cards with him a few times. He was not a bad man. Just unlucky." "Unlucky," Olivia repeated bitterly. "That is a kind way of putting it. What will you do now? I do not know. Walk into the prairie and let the coyotes have me, perhaps." She meant it as a dark joke, but Preston did not laugh. He turned to look at her properly, and there was something in his gaze that made her breath catch. It was not pity. It was not the calculating assessment she had grown used to from men who saw her situation as an opportunity. It was something else entirely. "You could come with me," he said. Olivia stared at him. "I do not even know you." "That is true. But I know enough. I know you are in a bad situation through no fault of your own. I know you are about to be forced into choices that no person should have to make. And I know I could use help on the trail south if you are willing to work." "What kind of help?" Olivia asked, suspicion rising automatically. She had learned the hard way that nothing came without a price. "Cooking, mostly. Camp work. I am driving 30 head of horses to a ranch outside Santa Fe. It is a 2-week journey if the weather holds. I will pay you $20 when we arrive, plus food and protection along the way. After that, you can decide what you want to do next. Why would you do this for a stranger?" Preston stood and gathered his horse's reins. "Because somebody did it for me once when I needed it. Because this town has already decided you are worth nothing, and I think they are wrong." He met her eyes again. "Because everyone deserves a chance to start over." Olivia felt something crack open in her chest, some frozen place she had been protecting since her father died. "I do not have supplies. I do not have proper clothes for the trail. I do not have anything. I have extra supplies. We can get you trail clothes in the morning before we leave. The question is whether you trust me enough to take the chance." She looked at him standing there in the fading light, this stranger who had no reason to help her and every reason to ride on past. She thought about the boarding house she could not return to, the town that had written her off, the limited and terrible futures that waited if she stayed. And she thought about the vast open country beyond Pueblo, full of dangers but also possibilities. "Yes," she said, "I will come with you." Preston nodded like she had just agreed to something as simple as sharing a meal. "Good. There is a camp just outside town where I have been staying. You can sleep there tonight. We will leave at first light." They walked together as darkness fell, leading the paint horse between them. Olivia felt the stares of townspeople who saw her leaving with a strange cowboy, heard the whispers that followed. Let them talk. She was already ruined in their eyes. At least this way she had a chance at survival. Preston's camp was a simple affair. A bedroll, a small fire, coffee pot sitting in the coals. He had 30 horses corralled in a temporary rope pen, beautiful animals with good lines. They nickered softly as Preston approached to check on them. "You know horses," Olivia observed. "Grew up around them. My father had a ranch in Wyoming before he passed. These belong to a breeder in Colorado Springs. I am delivering them to a buyer who wants to start a breeding program of his own." He handed her a tin cup of coffee, strong and bitter. "You know how to ride? I did once." It has been a while. You will remember, we will take it slow the first few days until you find your seat again." He pulled a blanket from his pack and handed it to her. "You can have my bedroll tonight. I will keep watch. I cannot take your bed. You can and you will. Those are the rules of the trail, Miss Jensen. The person who is not used to sleeping on the ground gets the bedroll." Olivia wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like river current. She wrapped herself in the blanket and lay down by the fire, sure she would be too anxious to sleep. But the warmth of the flames and the soft sounds of the horses and the knowledge that, for tonight at least, she was safe combined to pull her under. She woke before dawn to find Preston making coffee and frying bacon in a skillet. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a full meal. "Morning," Preston said without looking up. "We need to get you outfitted before we leave. I know a woman who runs a used clothing shop. She will sell us what you need without asking questions." They rode double on Preston's horse into town, Olivia sitting behind him and trying not to think about how close she was pressed against his back. The woman Preston knew was named Martha, a widow who ran her shop with brisk efficiency and no judgment. She sized Olivia up with one glance and started pulling items from her stock. "You will need sturdy clothes for the trail," Martha said. "Split skirts for riding, a good coat, boots that will not fall apart in the first week, hat to keep the sun off, work gloves." She piled items into Olivia's arms. "You can change in the back room." The clothes were worn but well made, practical in a way Olivia's dresses had never been. The split skirt felt strange at first, but she could see how it would make riding possible. The boots were scuffed leather, but they fit well. The hat was broad-brimmed and unfeminine and perfect. When she emerged, Preston looked up and nodded approval. "You look ready for the trail." Martha packed the remaining items and named a price that made Olivia wince. Preston paid without haggling, adding extra for a bedroll and saddlebags. As they prepared to leave, Martha touched Olivia's arm. "You be careful out there, girl. The trail is no place for the innocent." "I stopped being innocent the day my father died," Olivia said. Martha's expression softened. "Maybe so, but you have still got your life ahead of you. Do not waste it." They left Pueblo as the sun cleared the eastern plains, 30 horses streaming ahead of them and the whole world opening up like a promise. Olivia rode a steady mare Preston had chosen for her temperament, and within an hour, the muscle memory of riding returned to her body. The mare responded to her touch with easy grace, and for the first time in weeks, Olivia felt something other than trapped. Preston was a quiet trail companion, speaking mainly to point out landmarks or explain what he was doing with the horses. They moved at a steady pace, letting the herd set the speed. By midday, they had left civilization behind entirely, following a route that Preston seemed to know by heart. When they stopped to water the horses at a creek, Olivia dismounted and nearly fell, her legs shaking from hours in the saddle. "First day is always the hardest," Preston said, offering a hand to steady her. "Tomorrow will be worse. Day after that you will start getting your trail legs." "Wonderful," Olivia muttered, but she was almost smiling. They made camp that night in a valley protected from the wind. Preston showed Olivia how to hobble the horses so they could graze without wandering, how to build a fire that would not smoke and give away their position, how to make coffee strong enough to strip paint. He worked with an economy of motion that spoke of years on the trail, and Olivia found herself watching the way his hands moved, sure and capable. "You said someone helped you once," she said as they sat by the fire eating beans and hardtack. "What happened?" Preston stared into the flames for a long time. "I was 17. My father had just died, and the bank took the ranch for back taxes. I had nothing but a horse and a saddle and a lot of anger. I was planning to rob a stage, actually. Thought if the world was going to be unfair, I might as well take what I needed. What stopped you? A rancher named Thomas Walsh. He caught me watching the road, saw what I was planning. Instead of turning me in, he offered me a job. Worked his ranch for 3 years, learned everything he could teach me. When he died, he left me enough money to start over properly, told me to pay it forward someday. So this is you paying it forward. I suppose it is. Preston looked at her across the fire. But it is not just charity, Miss Jensen. I meant what I said about needing help. Driving horses alone is tricky work. Having another pair of eyes, another hand to help with camp, it makes a real difference. You can call me Olivia. I think we are past formalities. Olivia, he repeated, like he was testing how the name felt. I am Preston, then. No more Miss and Mr. That night, Olivia lay in her bedroll listening to the horses move in the darkness and the distant cry of coyotes. She thought about Pueblo and the life she had left behind. She thought about the uncertain future waiting in Santa Fe. And she thought about the man sleeping 10 feet away, who had looked at her and seen something worth saving when the rest of the world had written her off as worthless. The days fell into a rhythm. Wake at dawn, make coffee, break camp, move the horses south. Stop at midday to rest and water. Make camp at dusk, cook dinner, tend the horses, sleep. The work was hard and relentless, but there was a simplicity to it that Olivia found oddly comforting. Out here, her father's debts did not matter. Her reputation did not matter. All that mattered was keeping up with the horses and pulling her weight. Preston taught her the skills she would need. How to read weather in the clouds. How to spot a lame horse before it went fully wrong. How to shoot his rifle, standing behind her to adjust her stance and talking her through each step until she could hit a target at 50 yards. How to tell if water was safe to drink. How to navigate by stars. You are a good teacher, Olivia said one evening as they sat cleaning tack. You are a good student, quick to learn, not afraid of hard work. Those are rare qualities. I did not have much choice. My father taught me that work is the only thing that matters. He taught you wrong then. Preston looked up from the saddle he was oiling. Work matters, sure. But so do other things. Kindness matters. Courage matters. The ability to keep going when everything is stacked against you, that matters too. Olivia felt her throat tighten. The town did not think so. They looked at me like I was garbage to be swept away. Then they were fools. Preston's voice was fierce suddenly. You are not worthless, Olivia. You are not defined by your father's mistakes or by what some small-minded town thinks of you. You are worth exactly as much as any other person on this earth. Never forget that. She stared at him, something shifting in her chest. Why do you care? Because I have been where you are. Because I know what it feels like to have the world tell you that you are nothing. And because it is not true. It was not true for me, and it is not true for you. They sat in silence after that, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who understood each other in a way that did not require words. On the 6th day out of Pueblo, they ran into trouble. A group of 5 men rode up on their camp just after dawn. Rough-looking characters with hard eyes and trail dust coating them like a second skin. Their leader was a heavy-set man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Nice herd you got there, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. Mind if we water our horses? Help yourself, Preston said evenly. Creek is free for everyone. But the men did not move toward the creek. They sat on their horses, studying Preston and Olivia and the corralled horses with calculating gazes. We have been following you for 2 days, Scarface said. You are Preston Reed. Used to work for Walsh up in Wyoming. You have me at a disadvantage. I do not know you. Name is Garrett. I worked for Walsh too, until he fired me for borrowing a few head of cattle that were not mine. Heard he left you money when he died. Seems unfair, doesn't it? You getting a reward while men like me get nothing." Preston's hand had drifted closer to his revolver, a movement so subtle Olivia almost missed it. "That was years ago, Garrett. You should let it go." "Oh, I have let it go. Water under the bridge, but these horses you are driving, they would fetch a good price in Denver. Better than whatever you are being paid to deliver them to Santa Fe." "These horses are not for sale." Garrett smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "I am not talking about buying them. I am talking about taking them. 5 guns against 1, Reed. Those are bad odds." "5 guns against 2, Olivia said, stepping forward with Preston's rifle cradled in her arms. Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, but her hands were steady. Preston had taught her well. Garrett laughed. "The lady wants to play hero. That is sweet." "The lady knows how to shoot," Olivia said. "And I am close enough that even if my aim is poor, I will hit someone." The standoff stretched. Garrett's men shifted uneasily in their saddles. They had expected an easy score, not a fight. Finally, Garrett shrugged. "Not worth the bloodshed." "But you watch your back, Reed. These trails are dangerous. Accidents happen." They rode off, and Olivia realized she had been holding her breath. She let it out in a shaky exhale and lowered the rifle. "That was either very brave or very stupid," Preston said. "Probably both." "Were you really going to fight 5 men?" "I was going to try. Thank you for backing me up." They broke camp quickly after that and pushed the horses hard, putting distance between themselves and Garrett's crew. That night, Preston insisted they camp without a fire, and they took turns keeping watch. Olivia sat with the rifle across her lap, staring into darkness and listening for the sound of approaching horses. "You are thinking too loud," Preston said from his bedroll. "I can hear your thoughts from here." "I am thinking that this life is dangerous." "It is." "I am thinking that I could have been killed today." "You could have been." "And I am thinking that I do not regret coming with you." In the darkness, she heard the smile in his voice. "Good. I do not regret bringing you." They avoided Garrett and his men for the rest of the journey, but the encounter had shifted something between Olivia and Preston. They moved closer together, both figuratively and literally. She started sleeping nearer to his bedroll. He started touching her more often, a hand on her shoulder, steadying her elbow, small gestures that felt electric. On the 10th night, they camped in the ruins of an old trading post. The walls were mostly intact, providing shelter from a rising wind. They built a small fire inside and sat with their backs against the crumbling adobe, shoulders touching. "Tell me about Wyoming," Olivia said. "What was it like, growing up on a ranch?" Preston was quiet for a moment. "Hard work mostly, but beautiful. Mountains that went on forever. Winters so cold your breath would freeze. Summers where the grass grew tall enough to hide in." His voice softened with memory. "My mother used to say the land got into your blood, that once you lived out here you could never be happy in a city." Was she right? She was. "I tried Denver for a while after Walsh died. Hated every minute of it. Too many people, too much noise. I need space around me. I need to see the horizon." "I understand that. Even after just these 10 days, I cannot imagine going back to Pueblo. To living in a boarding house room, to measuring my life in other people's opinions." She turned her head to look at him. "Thank you, Preston, for giving me this chance." "You do not have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You looked at me when I had nothing and you saw value. You said I was not worthless when everyone else had already decided I was." Preston reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "You are not worthless, Olivia. You are priceless to me. Never forget that." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of something else entirely, something she had not felt in so long she had almost forgotten what it was like. Hope. "Preston," she whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But she did not want to. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing this new territory. Then Preston's hand came up to cup her face, and Olivia pressed closer, and the gentleness gave way to something deeper, more urgent. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since Pueblo," he admitted. "I have wanted you to do it since the third day on the trail, when you taught me to shoot, and I realized you were the first man who had ever treated me like an equal. You are more than my equal. You are my partner if you want to be. I want to be." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. That night, Olivia slept curled against Preston's chest, his arms wrapped around her, safer than she had ever felt in her life. The horses were quiet in the darkness. The stars wheeled overhead. And for the first time since her father died, Olivia believed that her life might turn out all right after all. They arrived in Santa Fe on the 14th day, driving the horses into a ranch on the outskirts of town. The buyer was a weathered rancher named Samuel Hart, who inspected each horse carefully before nodding satisfaction. "Fine stock," he said, counting out payment to Preston. "I will be looking for more in the spring if you are interested in another drive." "I might be," Preston said. "I will let you know." As promised, he paid Olivia her $20. It was more money than she had ever held at one time. "What will you do now?" Preston asked as they stood in the dusty ranch yard. "That depends. What are you going to do?" Preston smiled. "I was thinking I might find a piece of land around here, start my own operation. I have been saving for years, and with what Hart just paid me, I have enough for a down payment. It would be hard work, long hours, but it would be mine." "Hours," Olivia corrected. "If you want a partner." "Are you sure? This is not the life you were raised for." "The life I was raised for ended in Pueblo. This is the life I choose, a life with you, building something together." Preston pulled her into his arms right there in the open, not caring who saw. "Then yes, ours, every bit of it." They found land a month later, a beautiful valley 30 miles north of Santa Fe with good water and better grass. The previous owner had died, and his widow was selling cheap, eager to return to her family in Missouri. 160 acres, a small cabin, a barn that needed repairs, and all the potential in the world. Preston and Olivia were married by a circuit preacher the week after they signed the deed. There was no fancy ceremony, no guests, just the two of them standing in front of the cabin with the mountains rising behind them. But when Preston said his vows, his voice rough with emotion, and when Olivia promised to stand by him through whatever came, she meant it with every fiber of her being. The first year was brutally hard. They worked from dawn until long after dark, building up the ranch. Preston broke wild horses to sell. Olivia learned to manage the books, to negotiate with buyers, to judge horseflesh as well as her husband. They built onto the cabin, adding rooms as they saved money. They bought cattle and chickens and a milk cow. They planted a vegetable garden that Olivia tended with pride, and slowly, month by month, the ranch became successful. Preston had a reputation for honest dealing and quality stock. Buyers came from as far as Denver to see his horses. The money was never plentiful, but it was steady, and it was theirs. In their second summer, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She told Preston one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. His hand flew to her still flat stomach with wonder. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. The baby will come in February if I am counting right." Preston kissed her with such tenderness it made her throat ache. "You have given me everything, Olivia. Everything I never dared hope for. We gave it to each other. That is how partnerships work." Their son was born during a February blizzard, entering the world with a lusty cry that announced he would not be ignored. They named him Thomas, after the rancher who had saved Preston all those years ago. He was perfect, with his father's dark hair and his mother's stubborn chin. Olivia discovered she loved being a mother almost as much as she loved being a rancher's wife. Thomas was a happy baby who grew into a curious toddler, trailing after his father around the ranch and asking endless questions. When he was 2, Olivia became pregnant again, and this time they had a daughter. They named her Rose, and she was as fierce and beautiful as her namesake flower. The ranch continued to prosper. Preston took on a hired hand, then 2, then 3 as the operation grew. They built a proper barn and a bunkhouse for the hands. They expanded their herd. And through it all, Preston and Olivia worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word. On their 5th anniversary, Preston gave Olivia a gift. It was the mother-of-pearl hairbrush she had carried in her flour sack from Pueblo, the one she had sold during a lean winter to buy medicine when Thomas was sick with fever. Preston had tracked it down through 3 different owners and bought it back. "How did you find this?" Olivia asked, tears streaming down her face. "I remembered you looking at it the first night on the trail, like you were saying goodbye to your old life. I thought you might want to have a piece of it back. The good piece." Olivia set the brush down carefully and wrapped her arms around her husband. "You are the good piece. You are the best piece. Everything good in my life started the day I met you. You give me too much credit." "You saved yourself, Olivia. You just let me help." They stood together on their porch, watching their children play in the yard and their horses graze in the pasture. The mountains stood eternal in the distance. And Olivia thought about the terrified woman she had been in Pueblo, convinced she was worthless because the world had told her so. She thought about the cowboy who had looked past her circumstances and seen her true value. She thought about the journey that had brought them here to this life they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Preston asked. "Walking away from everything you knew?" "Not for a single moment. That life was killing me. You helped me find the life I was meant to live. We found it together." And that was the truth of it. They had found each other when both needed saving, and they had built something beautiful from nothing. Not because either of them was particularly special or blessed with good fortune, but because they had chosen to see value in each other, to work toward something better, to believe that the past did not have to define the future. 10 years after they left Pueblo, a letter arrived from Martha, the woman who had sold Olivia her trail clothes. She wrote that Silas McGraw had died, struck by lightning while foreclosing on another family. She wrote that the town had dried up somewhat, with the railroad moving its major depot to a different location. She wrote that some people still remembered Olivia Jensen, the worthless girl who had run off with a cowboy. Olivia read the letter aloud to Preston that evening, and then they burned it in the fireplace and never spoke of Pueblo again. That chapter of her life was closed. This was her life now. The ranch, her husband, their 4 children by then, Thomas and Rose and the twins who had come as a surprise 2 years prior, Matthew and Grace. The ranch had grown to 300 acres. They employed 7 full-time hands. Their horses were known throughout New Mexico and Colorado for their quality. And every spring, Preston and Olivia would take a trip together, just the 2 of them, driving a string of horses to wherever they were needed. It was their tradition, a way to remember where they had started and how far they had come. On one such trip, when Olivia was 35 and Preston was 37, they stopped at the creek where they had first camped together all those years ago. The land had not changed. The water still ran clear and cold. The prairie grass still stretched to the horizon. "You remember what I said to you that first night?" Preston asked as they sat by the fire. You said a lot of things. I said you would get your trail legs after a few days. Olivia laughed. I did. Though I remember those first days thinking I would die from the pain. And now look at you. You can ride all day and not even complain about it. That is because I have something to ride for, a home to return to, a life worth living. She leaned into his shoulder. You told me I was not worthless. Do you remember that? I remember. In the ruins of that trading post about 10 days in. You said I was priceless to you, that I should never forget it. Preston turned to face her properly, his hands framing her face the way they had that first time he kissed her. His hair was threaded with silver now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But his gaze was as clear and steady as ever. You are still priceless to me, Olivia. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. My partner, my love, the mother of my children, the person who makes every day worth waking up for. You are priceless to me. Never forget that. I will never forget. Just like I will never forget that you saw me when I was at my lowest and you chose to help me anyway. You gave me a chance when no one else would. We gave each other chances. That is what love is. Choosing to see the value in someone, even when the world cannot or will not. They kissed as the fire crackled and the horses stirred and the stars emerged one by one. And Olivia thought about the long road that had brought them to this moment. All the struggles and triumphs, the lean times and the prosperous ones, the fear and the hope, it had all been worth it. Every difficult step, every moment of doubt, every time she had wanted to give up but pressed on because Preston believed in her. They returned home a week later to find their children had managed the ranch beautifully in their absence. Thomas, at 15, was already as good with horses as his father. Rose, at 13, had a head for numbers that meant she would likely take over the books soon. The twins, at 8, were wild and joyful and full of questions about the trip. That night, after the children were asleep, Preston and Olivia sat on their porch and looked at everything they had built. The barn with its neat repairs, the pastures full of quality stock, the garden Olivia still tended, the bunkhouse where their hands slept. The swing Preston had built for the children hanging from the old cottonwood tree. We did good, didn't we? Olivia said. We did better than good. We built something lasting, something that will outlive us. Thomas will take over the ranch someday. He loves it as much as we do. And Rose will make sure it stays profitable. And the twins will keep everyone from taking things too seriously. Preston took her hand, their fingers interlacing automatically after so many years of practice. But whatever they do with it, whatever becomes of this place, they will know that it started with two people who refused to accept what the world said they were worth. They will know that we built this with love and hard work and faith in each other. Olivia squeezed his hand. You are getting sentimental in your old age. I am not old. I am seasoned. Like jerky, he laughed and pulled her close. Exactly like jerky, tough and long-lasting. They sat in comfortable silence, these two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that neither had dared dream possible. The night was cool and clear, perfect weather. In the distance, a coyote called and one of the horses answered with a low whinny. The sounds of home. The years continued to pass, as years do. The children grew and began to build their own lives. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from the next valley over, a sensible woman named Catherine who fit into the family like she had always been there. Rose shocked everyone by deciding to go to Denver for school, to study business and law. She returned 2 years later with a degree, and a quiet man named David who taught at the university and fell in love with ranch life, despite having no experience with it. The twins took longer to settle. Matthew wanted to be a horse trader like his father, and spent several years traveling before finally setting up his own operation in Arizona. Grace, as fierce as her name suggested, married a cavalry officer and moved to a fort in Wyoming. Though she visited often and always said she missed the ranch through all of it, Preston and Olivia remained the steady center. They were the foundation upon which everything else was built. They worked the ranch together even as their bodies began to slow with age. They sat on their porch every evening and talked about everything and nothing. They took their spring trips together without fail, though they traveled shorter distances and took more time getting there. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. All 4 children came with their spouses and the grandchildren, filling the house with noise and laughter and life. They roasted a steer, and Olivia made her famous apple pies, and someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing in the yard as the sun went down. Preston pulled Olivia into a dance, moving easily despite his 57 years. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked as they swayed to the music. "All of it? No, never. When I was sitting on that fence in Pueblo, I could not imagine anything beyond the next day, certainly nothing as wonderful as this. I could not have done any of it without you. And I would have had no life worth living without you. We saved each other, Preston." He kissed her there in front of everyone, in front of their children and grandchildren and the hands who worked for them and the neighbors who had come to celebrate. And when he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. "You are still priceless to me, Olivia Reed. After all these years, you are still the most valuable thing in my life. Never forget that." "I could never forget. You remind me every day with the way you look at me, the way you listen to me, the way you still reach for my hand whenever we walk together. You have been showing me my worth for 25 years. The party went late into the night. The children told stories about growing up on the ranch. The grandchildren ran wild in the darkness, catching fireflies and playing games that had no names. And Preston and Olivia sat together on their porch, watching it all with deep contentment. "We should do this every year," Rose said, coming up to hug them both. "All of us together like this." "We should," Preston agreed. "Family is everything. Do not ever forget that, any of you." Thomas raised a glass. "To Ma and Pa. To the 2 people who built all of this from nothing and taught us what it means to work hard and love harder." Everyone drank to that, and Olivia felt tears rolling down her cheeks, happy tears, grateful tears. The tears of a woman who had been told she was worthless and had instead built a life beyond her wildest dreams. The years became more precious as they grew older. Preston developed a cough that would not go away, and Olivia's hands ached in the morning from years of hard work. They slowed down but did not stop. Thomas took over most of the day-to-day operations, but Preston still insisted on breaking young horses himself. Olivia still kept the books and managed the household and tended her garden. They took their last trip together when Preston was 62 and Olivia was 60. They drove 12 horses to a buyer in Colorado, taking nearly a month for a journey that used to take 2 weeks. But they did not mind the slower pace. It gave them time to talk, to remember, to simply be together without the demands of the ranch. They stopped at that same creek where they had first camped, where Preston had first kissed her, where they had returned so many times over the years. The water still ran clear. The grass still stretched to infinity. "You know what I think about when we come here?" Olivia asked as they sat by their evening fire. "What?" "I think about the girl I was, sitting on that fence in Pueblo with a flour sack of belongings and no hope. And I think about how impossible all of this would have seemed to her. The ranch, the children, the life we have built. She could not have imagined it. But you became more than that girl. You became Olivia Reed, rancher and mother, and the strongest woman I have ever known." I became those things because you helped me believe I could be. You saw potential in me when I could not see it in myself." Preston took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "I saw what was always there, Olivia. The courage, the determination, the heart. I just gave you space to show it. You gave me everything. A purpose, a home, a family, a love I never dared hope for. You gave me my life, Preston. My real life, the one I was meant to live. And you gave me mine. We are even." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers. Finally, Preston spoke again, his voice rough. "I am getting old, Olivia. My body is wearing out. I can feel it. So am I. We are getting old together. But when my time comes, I need you to know something. I need you to know that every day I have spent with you has been a gift. That you made my life complete in ways I did not know were possible. That I have loved you since the day I saw you sitting on that fence, looking like you were ready to fight the whole world even though you had nothing to fight with." Olivia felt tears streaming down her face. "Do not talk like that. We have years left." "Maybe we do, but I need to say it anyway. You are priceless to me, Olivia. You have always been priceless to me. Never forget that." "I will never forget. How could I? You have been telling me that for 30 years, showing me every day what it means to be valued and loved and cherished." They held each other under the stars, two old people who had built something beautiful from nothing, who had loved each other through every trial and triumph. And Olivia thought that no matter what came next, she was ready for it. Because she had lived a full life, a good life, a life that mattered. Preston lived another 5 years, long enough to see his grandchildren growing into fine young people, long enough to celebrate his 40th anniversary with Olivia, long enough to know that everything he had built would endure. He died peacefully in his sleep one autumn night, Olivia beside him as she had been for 40 years. The funeral was attended by hundreds. People came from all over New Mexico and Colorado to pay their respects to Preston Reed, the honest horse trader, the fair employer, the man who had helped countless young cowboys get their start. But Olivia knew the truth of him went deeper than that. He had been the man who looked at a worthless girl on a fence and saw someone priceless. He had been the man who gave her a chance when no one else would. He had been her partner, her love, her everything. After the funeral, after everyone had gone home, Olivia stood at his grave and spoke to him one last time. "You told me I was priceless, that I should never forget it. I never did forget, Preston, not for a single day. And I want you to know that you were priceless to me too. You are priceless to me still. You always will be." She lived another 12 years, long enough to see her great-grandchildren born, long enough to watch Thomas turn the ranch into something even bigger than she and Preston had built. Long enough to know that their legacy would continue, that the values they had instilled would endure. On her last day, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Olivia looked around at all the love in the room and smiled. She had been called worthless once, by people who could not see past circumstance and bad luck. But Preston had seen the truth. He had seen her value when she could not see it herself. And together, they had built a life that proved the doubters wrong. "Tell me the story again," one of her great-grandchildren asked, a girl named Olivia after her, "about how you and great-grandpa Preston met." So Olivia told the story one last time, about Pueblo and the fence and the cowboy who had offered her a chance, about the trail and the horses and learning to shoot, about the kiss in the trading post ruins and the words that had changed her life. "He said I was priceless," she finished, her voice growing soft. "He said I should never forget it, and I never did." "What happened then?" the child asked. "Then we lived," Olivia said simply. "We built a ranch and raised a family and loved each other through everything. We lived a good life, a full life, the best life." She closed her eyes then, tired but content. And her last thought was of Preston, waiting for her somewhere beyond this world, ready to take her hand and tell her once more that she was priceless to him, that she should never forget. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through Thomas's line, and then his children's line. The story of Preston and Olivia became family legend, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. The story of how a worthless girl and a cowboy with nothing but a good heart had built something lasting. The story of how love and hard work and faith in each other could overcome any obstacle. And in the family Bible, carefully preserved through the years, were the words Preston had written on their wedding day. Olivia Jensen read, "Priceless. Never forget." She never did.